We meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. If this capsule history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
Welcome back to the next episode of the Energy Impact Podcast. Today, we are here with the Executive Director of Nigeria's Rural Electrification Fund, Sanusi. Dr. Sanusi, it is fantastic to have you here. You have over 10 years of experience advising public and private entities on electricity access planning, mini-grid regulations, renewable energy policies, and data management systems for the unelectrified communities in Nigeria. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Adam. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So you're the youngest executive director of Nigeria's Rural Electrification Fund. It's a position that you were appointed to by President Buhari in 2017. And your work has helped to increase private sector participation and involvement in rural electrification and renewable energy. You're a 2017 Mandela Washington Fellow. In 2020, you were named the Young Leader of the Year Award at the African Power, Water, and Energy Industry Awards. It's fantastic to have you here. How did you get your start in energy? Is this a passion that you've always had?
Yeah, Adam, for most Nigerians, growing up in a community where, there's lack of access to electricity for most parts of, the country, I think every Nigerian basically has passion for that sector because right from when you're in primary, secondary school, we keep hearing from our teachers that, for the country to move forward and for the economy to grow and for manufacturing and industries to rise up, you need steady, affordable, electricity supply. And we all grew up just wondering why it's so difficult for us to achieve this. Mm-hmm. So I think I took it a notch higher to not just wonder, but look for solutions as to how we can, actually solve the energy access challenge. And that led me to working, within the space, as well as, carrying out various kinds of research, from my BSc to my master's, to my PhD levels, just wondering and researching, looking for solutions. And then I've been lucky enough to not just, end it at research level, but also work with, various stakeholders in terms of putting policies and regulations in place. And now being lucky and privileged to be appointed here to implement. The trajectory has been, like a foolproof one from research all the way to implementing now, which is what I'm currently doing anyways. So I think, it's not everybody that has that luck, to have that kind of trajectory, mm-hmm. to work in areas that they are passionate about and, across the sphere, of the sector. So I think I count myself lucky to be able to, grow in this sector from that level to where I am now.
Has it always been a goal of yours to focus on rural electrification? Did you ever consider other avenues like being an engineer or something else, an architect, or was a PhD in economics always what was on your target list?
To be honest, right from when I was in secondary school, that's high school. Mm-hmm. I had always known that I, at some point, would want to reach the pinnacle of my, education. So that's gaining a PhD. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that was in my head for some weird reason. But right from secondary school, my friends had already started calling me doctor, doctor. And that's from, the kind of goals that I used to share with them that, I'm going to have my PhD, But in terms of what I wanted it to be in, I wasn't sure until I got to university. Although while I was in secondary school, my dad wanted me to study engineering because he had a construction company. So he wanted me to come work for him. But I wasn't very good with the sciences. So after my first term, my senior secondary one class, so I had to leave. I went to the social sciences class. I mean, there's a way they divide all of the classes based on what you hope to study. And I was doing fairly well there, and I loved economics. I knew I was going to study economics, at my undergrad. But while studying economics, I did a course, in energy economics that really spurred my interest in the sector. So I started to look at the sector, deeper, and I realized that though generally the sector in Nigeria had challenges, but a lot of work was already being done on the on-grid side. So those on the national grid and all of the activities from generation of power to transmission to distribution to households already had a lot of people focusing on that. But what was lacking then was almost half of the population of Nigeria who were on under the rural electrification, or if you like, underserved or unserved totally. We looked at it then, close to 50%, which is translating to about 80-something million Nigerians, were not having as much attention as those that were on the grid. And I felt that was a challenge, because if you had almost equal numbers of citizens, one gaining all of the attention and all of the funding, and the other not really getting much attention, I felt there was a problem. So I needed to probe deeper and see why people were not interested in going to the area, and see what we could do to get not just government interested in the area, because it was very important, as a large chunk of those at the bottom of the pyramid population of Nigeria, fell under that, category. So I was interested for that reason. So yeah, I had to do my master's in energy finance, and of course, while doing my research, I realized that financing was a major challenge. So, alongside other issues of planning, policies, regulations, which I knew was within the purview of government to quickly put together, but financing wasn't only going to fall under government purview. We needed all stakeholders to come together to look at how we could solve this energy access challenge, especially in the rural communities. So yeah, at that point, I knew at the point in my university, I knew I wanted to do rural education. And I tell you what, Adam, while I was applying for universities to do my master's in, for instance, while I was applying to do my BSc at my undergrad level, I applied to universities economics is everywhere. I applied to universities in the US. I got admitted in a couple, but I wasn't able to resume because I didn't get a visa then. So I had to stay back in Nigeria to do my BSc. But for the choice of my MSc, it was a very deliberate one. It was driven by the course that I wanted to study, right? So I needed to go to an energy school, a multidisciplinary energy school that had, everything from policy to law, energy generally, to financing, all of those things for rural electrification. And when I searched, it was only one university I found at that time, which was in Scotland, University of Dundee. And I went there, even though it was very cold. But I had to go there because I was really interested in that course, and then I got admitted, and the rest is history.
So let's put that into context. So the country of Nigeria itself, it's located in West Africa. It has several countries that border from Niger to Chad, Cameroon, Benin. It's the southern coast of the Gulf of Guinea. And the country itself is the 7th most populous in the world. So it has just over 200 million people. It's the largest economy in Africa, the 26th largest in the world. And it even has the largest city in Africa, which is Lagos. So you went away, you went to Scotland for school, you came back. Did you just jump immediately into the Nigerian Rural Electrification Agency, or was there a journey after your PhDs that led you to where you are today?
Yeah, there was a bit of journey, and this is a good question, Adam, and this would speak to especially those that are in diaspora, Nigerians in diaspora, that are looking to come back to Nigeria. It is not automatic, right? you have to make a conscious decision to want to come back to make an impact somewhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be in my sector. I mean, I chose my sector because that's where I have capacity. You need to be ready to understand the system. You need to be able to grow within the system, and eventually, maybe you would prosper. So I was driven by that passion to come back. Even before I finished my PhD, I had to take like a study, no, not study leave now. It's what's it called? I had to come back to do a field study, for my research. So I went to Ghana, to do my field work. I had to learn how to use some software for the modeling that I was doing then for my research, my PhD this time. And upon rounding up that, I had to come back to Nigeria. And then I got an internship position with the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading. I had to do that because I needed to be within the space, practically on ground, because my topic was looking at Nigeria, so that I could also, interview a couple of stakeholders, which was part of my work, and then finish up writing and submit. So I was given that permission to stay back, and then, even before the advent of COVID, we're doing a lot of video calls, virtual meetings with my supervisors and the rest of them. So it helped me to really understand the sector. So I stayed here for 1 year until I finished my PhD and defended. And then when I came back, I got a job with the German International Cooperation Agency called the GIZ. It's similar to the USAID of America or the DFID of UK. I worked under the Nigerian Energy Support Program, and this program was providing technical support, to the Nigerian government, especially the power sector, various agencies within the power sector, where they, basically try to put all of the, frameworks in place, right? So like the policies and regulations and all of those that had to do with rural electrification. In my case, I was in charge of rural electrification planning and then database management. So we needed to understand, which is something I also did at my PhD level, we needed to understand where within Nigeria are those communities that don't have access to electricity. Before that research, there was no such thing. We needed to know where the grid, the national grid stopped, and where it would make sense for us to extend the national grid to other villages, or where it would make sense for us to extend standalone systems like mini grids and solar home systems, to hard to reach communities. So all of this database, we're able to fine tune with the GIZ where I worked, and then it provided a platform which the country still uses till date, although we are trying to update it in terms of how to move and plan for rural electrification. So it was a lot of work, and I was appointed from that program, to come to the Rural Electrification Fund here to operationalize the fund. As you know, the Rural Electrification Fund is under the Rural Electrification Agency, which has the mandate to provide, promote, coordinate rural electrification across Nigeria.
Let's talk about that for a bit. So the country itself is fairly sizable. There's just over 920,000 square kilometers, which makes the 33rd largest country in the world. And if the vast majority of people are living in urban settings, there's a great swath of land that the REA, the Rural Electrification Agency, actually focuses on. Can you give us a bit of context of what REA is, what it's focusing on, where people are located, how spread out they are? What's the challenge that the organization is really trying to tackle?
Okay, so let me just give you a bit of background. In 2005, the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of Nigeria was signed into law. So it's an act that sought to, restructure the power sector. So the power sector used to be a vertically integrated power sector where government was in charge of electricity generation, transmission, distribution under a big body called the Nigerian Electric Power Authority. But obviously, for so many reasons, inefficiency, corruption, the fact that we're just not meeting our goals. So that body wasn't meeting the requisite targets of government in terms of scaling up access to electricity. And then it was realized that the sector needed to be decentralized and unbundled and also move towards a regulated economy, because it was under a complete monopoly before. So we moved towards, so this act of 2005 now created all the necessary sort of agencies and guide towards moving to a private sector led or driven and regulated economy. So now we now have generation companies who are regulated and have been unbundled, several of them. We have a transmission company, which is still one single body under government, but generation is now under private sector, hands. And then we have the distribution companies as well, who are also were unbundled and sold to private individuals, right? So rural electrification was still a big, question mark, right? Because you couldn't leave the rural people at the mercy of, the distribution companies, because obviously it would take them a long time before they would even consider going there, because their motive is profit, right? So government needed to still take care of rural electrification. So that's what the structure is like now. So for me, the Rural Electrification Agency was created to move away from that government providing EPC 100% without having a sustainability plan, to more of working with private developers. That's why we have the fund, because the fund is there to support private-public partnerships, towards achieving goals. And this solves two problems. One, you have value for money. Two, you are sure that the projects will be sustained, because the private guys also bring in their equity to match, whatever fund you bring in, and they implement the projects under your supervision, and they operate and maintain it over, a long term, say 10, 15, 20 years. So for us, this is more sustainable way to go. So that's what the agency is there, to do. However, you'll notice that even within areas where the grid serves, there's still epileptic supply. So we're not just dealing with unelectrified communities or unserved communities. We're also dealing now, having to deal with underserved communities. So in the true sense of it, of being Rural Electrification Agency, we're not just focusing on rural, because of the huge problems we still have within even the urban areas. For instance, we're intervening in universities, for instance, because universities, especially government universities, federal government universities, we are providing solar electricity to about 37 federal universities and 7 university teaching hospitals at the moment. And these are huge universities that we're providing megawatt scale projects for. And this has been also been supported by World Bank, the African Development Bank. And then, we're still doing a lot of the rural electrification projects that we need to do. And we do this more through clean energy. I'm talking about renewable energy, such as solar, largely solar, because Nigeria, as you know, sub-Saharan Africa, we're very prolific when it comes to, solar technology and resources. So it's easy for us to deploy solar. But we're also open and exploring other technologies that has to do with biomass and small hydro and all of those. So it's limitless in terms of what is possible, for us to provide electricity to our people. So the scale of the challenge is huge. The scale is huge, but we have been really pushing, because we know we can't do it alone as government, pushing for private sector involvement. And the response so far has been very good as well. So it's just a matter of time before we'll be able to achieve the target of electrifying all those that currently don't have access to electricity in Nigeria.
It's almost as if the fund should be the under-electrified fund instead of just the rural.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah.
So two weeks ago, there was a post that shared that you signed another grant agreement with another private developer, which brought the performance-based grants to 12 developers with signed agreements covering 87 grants, or 87 sites rather. How do these grants improve energy access across the nation? What are they actually funding? Can you describe the mechanism and the projects?
Okay, so there are capital subsidies. As you know, the initial capital outlay for especially projects that has to do with renewable energy are usually huge. So the upfront costs. And if you allow the private sector to go and source money at competing rates, from commercial banks or bring in their equity 100% to develop these projects, you immediately face some challenges. One, they need to cover their cost over the shortest period of time. If the money is coming from these sources I just mentioned, it's difficult for them to do that, and nobody's going to loan them, to do that. That's one. Two, the tariff would be high, and it would not be affordable for rural people to, consume the electricity generated. So this is where the grant comes in. It's called capital subsidies because you are subsidizing the initial capital, outlay of the project in such a way that it makes it flexible for the developer to come in and still see it as a profitable venture, while also, providing this electricity to the rural people at a reasonable and affordable cost based on this grant that has been provided. So if you take away the grants, then you see that the tariff will be very high, and they will not be able to recoup their investments within this short time. So for us, we are there to balance things and make it like a win-win situation, allow the developer to still have a fair return, and then protect the consumers from paying exorbitant prices. So that's what the grant helps with. And it's important at this stage of our development to have this sort of funds blend. If you read through research and just generally stakeholders consideration, even with World Bank, you know that you need to blend funds for rural electrification because it's a very delicate sector where if you do not get the blending of the fund right, then you tend to not achieve what you need to achieve. So there's a role for government to come in, and even international development agencies to come in and provide some sort of concessionary loans or even grants. And then there's the role for the private sector to come in as well, maybe through equity or getting debt resources from banks, to also blend with what we have so that they can put projects on the ground. So for us in government, we see it as a win-win situation because we are not spending 100% of the funds to implement the project. We are probably spending half of it. And then we are not burdened with the responsibility of staying there on site to operate and maintain. So we have our private sector guys that help us to do that. So it allows us to quickly move to other places. So we restrict ourselves to just regulation and more supervision and monitoring to ensure that things are doing well. So we don't overstretch our resources. So this is just the general idea of how we hope to move. And if you know Nigeria, we're looking at thousands of sites that we need to electrify. These are huge. So we cannot be in every place, all the time. So this is a good way for us to move. It also helps to generate, employment and improve incomes within the rural communities. Because the more of these smaller distribution companies or developers, if you like, we have, the more jobs they are creating. And the more communities they go into by providing electricity for productive users and also for households, you see that businesses are booming and the incomes are enhanced. And for us, it's an overall development, target that needs to be met, through this model. And it's been working very well for us.
Is it more challenging to develop in certain areas of the country than others? The country is a federal republic. It has 36 various states. I imagine that there are local jurisdictions and regulations within those jurisdictions that can pose interesting and unique challenges. Have you found that some areas are rapid to deploy in versus very slow for others? And if so, why?
In terms of the regulations, local regulations, I think we're all aligned. As you know, Nigeria runs a three-tiered government. We have the federal, state, and the local governments. And then we have various kinds of lists when it comes to who does what. So we have the exclusive list, we have the concurrent list. Electricity happens to be, and then we have the residual list. I think electricity generation has to be on the maybe concurrent or residual list, which means that everybody can actually generate electricity and distribute. However, there's a clause by the regulator that if there is no local regulation, then the federal one would automatically supersede. or would be adopted. And if the local one is clashing with the federal one, then that's also a problem. I think the federal one would, subsist. So in terms of deployment, we don't have a problem when it comes to regulation at that different level to slow things down. If anything, everyone is welcoming and embraces any project that has to do electrification all across the country. So what you would say can slow things down has to do with topography, for instance. If you go to the southern parts, you have a lot of water bodies. It's difficult to move. It's difficult to move your equipment to the rural communities because you need to go by boats, and sometimes it's raining throughout the year. You don't get as much energy yield as you get in the northern part. And what other things? Maybe land issues. Yeah, land issues. In some states, it's more organized. So it's a one-stop shop where you go and just get all the necessary permits and title deeds and all of those things that you need. In other places, you need to go to individual, offices, for you to get this. But ultimately, I think we are all aligned when it comes to electrifying our communities, both at the federal, state, and the local level. So all this deviation, I think, are just little things that has to do with actual implementation on ground, but nothing deliberate in terms of having different regulations, right? That tends to slow things down.
What is eligible for a grant then? Is it companies that are focused on generation? Is it mini grids or hybrid mini grids? Is it everything under the sun and you choose on a case-by-case basis? Who can apply and what's the process?
Well, we have our criteria. Usually would announce what the grant is about. If it's for mini grids and solar home systems and grid extension, we'll state it outrightly because that's what the procurement law of Nigeria, provides for. Mm-hmm. It should be expressly stated what sort of technologies are encouraged and which ones are not, and what you need to do. So local we have statutory requirements. So for instance, you need to be paying your taxes, you need to be registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission of Nigeria. You need to be paying all the necessary, there's some little funds that you need to be paying, to update your company, and your papers need to be ready. You need to have experience, most importantly, and you need to have demonstrated this experience by showing us some of the projects that you've done, mm-hmm. which of course we'll go and take a look and see if it fits in, and then you're shortlisted. So anybody that meets the criteria really, can apply, and then we do our evaluation, and based on our scoring matrices, we're able to pick those that come up tops and mm-hmm. Eventually get approval, from the board to give them, the grants.
In terms of generation projects, what size are we talking about? Is this kilowatt? Is this multi-megawatt? Are there any areas of the country that need more than 10 megawatts at once that you guys are focused on?
So we have various programs, but ultimately anything below 1 megawatt for rural communities is a space that we typically play in. But if you look at our university projects, those ones are on a megawatt scale because the universities are huge. I think we have one that is almost 8 point something megawatts. That's about the biggest. So we have programs. Look at REA as the coordinating agency, and look at different targeted programs under REA for different programs, right? Under REA. And if you look at the way we are structured, we are supposed to coordinate the space. So we don't limit ourselves to just doing, although you see that anything typically below 1 megawatt mm-hmm. is where we play, However, there are special intervention programs that maybe based on the interest of the government of the day, they can ask us to, implement, like the university program. If you look at the university projects, most of them are, typically megawatt scale. We have up to 8 megawatts, but these are like captive power. So whichever, depending on which program, we could have mini grids, we could have even as small as solar home systems of 30 watts, 50 watts, 150 watts. And then we have kilowatt scale program projects for mini grids. So 100 kilowatts, 150, 50, and then we have megawatt scale as well for universities and, markets. So it depends on the program really.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go as high as megawatt scale.
Is the government setting metrics and goals that state we want the entire country to be electricity accessible by X date, or is it at that point? What is that scale right now?
We're looking at 2030 in line with the United Nations Sustainable Energy for All goal. I think we're all looking at 2030 to see how we can provide 100% access, to electricity for all of our, rural communities. So that's what we are working towards at the moment.
What is the biggest challenge to reaching the goal? Is it time? Is it human capital and human resources? What is the one thing, if you said this can be my silver bullet to make sure that we hit 2030?
It's resources. We need capital. We don't have enough. Because of the scale of the problem, we don't have enough. And to be honest, it's been a long time, coming for us in Nigeria, because we've demonstrated various kinds of pilots. We've tried various technologies. We have various kinds of plans and policies and regulations in place. So we've built capacity over the years. So what we need now is, and we're implementing already. So for us to implement at a faster rate, we need more money to spread, across the country. Because whatever we have now is, if you look at it compared to what we need to achieve, it's not enough, So for me, if I would mention one thing, I would say capital. We need more capital.
So oftentimes when we have conversations like these, it's very high level of granular of we're trying to do this to electrify a country. Let's focus on the really nitty-gritty specifics. Do you have any stories of successes that REA or REF have had that you go, this is the direct impact of what we've done, and this is what makes me smile at night when I'm going to sleep?
So what keeps me awake at night is constantly looking at, because my job is to raise funds for the agency to do its job, right? So how do I get more money, for us to achieve our goals, right? Because every day we get requests, from communities saying, oh, please, we heard you've done this for this community. When are you going to come, do this for us? A lot of requests. And we have an idea where all of these, communities are from our plans, right? Now, what makes me happy is anytime we connect a community, most of these communities, you'll be surprised. Maybe when you come to Nigeria, I take you to a few of them.
Yeah, please.
Are tens and tens of kilometers away from. So you're looking at, okay, so let me give you a typical example. We're in a state in the southwest of Nigeria, Ogun State. And Ogun State, there's a forest reserve, where you have to drive like 60 kilometers into the forest reserve, right? So you're driving in, I don't know if you've been to very typical forest with bad roads, the roads are not tarred. So it's just, you going, up and down, very, very bad roads. And you have to cross terrible bridges. And then you drive for that long and you get to a community where you see people have been living for upwards of 100 years and they've never had electricity. So you can just imagine the day you connect power to this community, and then you're coming and you're bringing the entire world to come and commission this project. You're bringing in the state government, you're bringing in federal government, you're bringing in international observers, and they are seeing these people for the first time. So you can imagine the kind of excitement. Yeah. So usually they come out with the drums and, they sing and dance, and everyone is happy. So we commission and, we leave them with the private developers to continue. We leave our contacts. Anytime they have issues, they reach out to us. So we have so many, and those are the typical villages, that we go to. You see women, now happy because they have, they don't need to, travel miles, kilometers to go get water, clean water, because with this power coming, they now have boreholes. They can just, pump water and have water at home. You see students are happy because they don't need to suffer under at night using candles, candlelight to study. They now have lights in their schools. They can stay longer hours. You see, businesses are happy because they don't need to use diesel generators. or the gasoline generators, to power their businesses. They now have clean energy. They don't need to worry about the sound pollution and the air pollution coming out from all this unclean energy. So it's just, for me, it's not just a job, it's a passion, because there's no amount of salary that justifies the fulfillment that you get when you go to give electricity to these communities, and they're truly happy and you can feel it. You know that the work that you do is important. It's an impact, it's social impact, but the impact is really high. It has very high impact in terms of delivery and what you do. So and this example is just all over the country. You go to my state, Kogi State, where for over 100 years, my ancestral home, they've never had electricity, until we provided them mini grids as well. And these mini grids are very easy to deploy, especially for hard to reach communities, like I've mentioned. You go to Gombe State in the northeast. Some of these northeastern states have already been ravaged with, terrorist activities. So most communities have moved to IDPs. When you go there, you give them electricity, at least to make their stay there better, and easier. You see the gratitude on the faces of these people. So across Nigeria, from north to south, from east to west, it's the same story, honestly. And for me, that's the best part of the job.
It sounds unbelievably fulfilling and rewarding. I don't think that we can end this on a better note. Dr. Sanusi Ohiare, Executive Director of the Rural Electrification Funds in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining today for the Energy Impact Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
Our leadership in science and industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligations to ourselves as well as others, all require us to make this effort, to solve these mysteries, to solve them for the good of all men and for the progress of all people.